Prepare to
We had just moved into a little ranch house in the suburbs. Storybook neighborhood, quiet, friendly neighbors, picket fences, the whole 9 yards. Suffice it to say that this was supposed to be a new start for me, a recently single dad, and my 3-year-old son. A time to move on from the previous year's drama and stress. I viewed the thunderstorm as a metaphor for this fresh start. One last show of theatrics before the dirt and grime of the past would be washed away. My son loved it anyway, even with the power out. It was the first big storm he'd ever seen. Flashes of lightning flooded the bare rooms of our house, imparting unpacked boxes with long creeping shadows, and he jumped and squealed as the thunder boomed. It was well past his bedtime before he'd finally settled down enough to go to sleep. The next morning, I found him awake in bed and smiling. "I watched the lightning at my window," he proudly announced. A few mornings later, he told me the same thing. "You're silly," I said. "It didn't storm last night, you were only dreaming." "Oh." He seemed somewhat disheartened. I ruffled his hair and told him not to worry, there should be another storm soon. Then it became a pattern. He would tell me how he watched the lightning outside his window at least twice a week, despite there being no storms. Recurring dreams of that first memorable thunderstorm, I figured. It's easy to hate myself in hindsight. Everybody assures me there's nothing I could have done, no way I could have known. But I'm supposed to be the guardian of my child, and these are useless words of comfort. I constantly relived that morning, making my coffee, pouring milk over my cereal, and picking up the newspaper to read about the pedophile local authorities had just arrested. It was front-page stuff. Apparently, this guy would select a young target, usually a boy, stake out their house for a while and take flash photos of them through their window while they slept. Sometimes he did more. My stomach sank as the connection was made. At the time, it was merely something from a child's imagination. In retrospect, it is the scariest thing I've ever heard. About a week before the predator was caught, my son came up to me in his pajamas. "Guess what?" he asked. "What?" "No more lightning at my window." I played along. "Oh, that's nice. It finally died down, huh?" "No, now it's in my closet." I've yet to see the photos police have collected. It had been a long, tiring day at work. It was quiet as I waited alone for the train. It was a bit after midnight and so dark that I could only see the square foot around me that the small light illuminated. Fortunately, I wasn't stuck waiting long for the train. Eagerly, I ran in the second the doors opened. There were only 2 other men in the compartment, not unusual for this time of night. The place reeked of smoke from the older man huffing on a cigarette. He took another long drag of it and watched me as I came in and took my seat. I sat and looked up at the other man, sitting across from the smoker. He was only about 5 seats away, but his face was hidden by his hood, so I had trouble making out his features. His eyes, though, I could see those clearly. One was normal, but the other was red, where it should be white. He stared shamelessly back at me with a tight, almost pained expression. I smiled at him, trying to break the tension, but he just stared. I looked out the window, trying to ignore his gaze, but I could still feel his eyes on me. The train lights began to flicker and went out for a moment. "Sorry, folks," said a voice over the static of the PA. "We're gonna get maintenance on that in the morning. We apologize for any inconvenience." My stomach dropped and I struggled to control my breathing. I reminded myself that there was no reason to be afraid of the dark, that I was a grown woman, a tax-paying adult who... Oh, thank God, the lights were back. I hadn't even realized my eyes were squeezed shut. Sighing, I opened them to see the man's unsettling eye staring directly into mine from only 2 seats away. Bewildered, I looked over at the older man who hadn't moved from his seat. He took another drag from his cigarette and coughed, acting like nothing had happened. The train rumbled down the tracks. I was afraid to look back at the red-eyed man. I didn't want to. I didn't want to move or even breathe. I tried to convince myself that the whole thing was in my mind. Maybe I was just tired from a long day of work. Maybe I was just paranoid and he wasn't even looking at me. The lights flickered again and went out. I held my breath, waiting for the lights to come back. After a moment, they did. And he was in the seat next to me, his face only a few inches away from mine. I leaned back. "What the hell, man? What do you think you're doing?" He didn't respond. Instead, the smoker angrily said, "Look, kid, if you wanted me to put out the cigarette, you just had to ask nice, okay? Not you, this asshole over here." The smoker stared at me for a second, confused. "It's just me and you here, kid. You're right?" The red-eyed man hadn't moved or responded at all. The lights went out again. A man went to a hotel and walked up to the front desk to check in. The woman at the desk gave him his key and told him that on the way to his room there was a door with no number that was locked and no one was allowed in there. She explained that it was a storeroom and that it was out of bounds. She reminded him of this several times before allowing him upstairs. So he followed the instructions of the woman at the front desk, going straight to his room and going to bed. However, the insistence of the woman had piqued his curiosity, so the next night he walked down the hall to the door and tried the handle. Sure enough, it was locked. He bent down and looked through the wide keyhole. Cold air passed through it, chilling his eye. What he saw was a hotel bedroom like his, and in the corner was a woman whose skin was incredibly pale. She was leaning her head against the wall, facing away from the door. He stared in confusion for a while. Was this a celebrity? The owner's daughter? He almost knocked on the door out of curiosity, but decided not to. As he was still looking, the woman turned sharply and he jumped back from the door, hoping she would not suspect he had been spying on her. He crept away from the door and walked back to his room. The next day, he returned to the door and looked through the wide keyhole. This time, all he saw was redness. He couldn't make anything out besides a distinct red color, unmoving. Perhaps the inhabitants of the room knew he was spying the night before and had blocked the keyhole with something red. He felt embarrassed that he had made the woman so uncomfortable and hoped she had not made a complaint with the woman on the front desk. At this point, he decided to consult her for more information. She sighed and said, "Did you look through the keyhole?" The man told her that he had, and she said, "Well, I might as well tell you the story of what happened in that room. A long time ago, a man murdered his wife in there, and we find that even now, whoever stays there gets very uncomfortable. But these people were not ordinary. They were white all over, except for their eyes, which were red." I'm very worried about my son. More than worried at this point. Terrified. His behavior these past few weeks is not normal, not healthy. It makes me think there's something wrong. At first, he would just come and stand at the doorway. He did this at night, just before I'd be ready to fall asleep. I'd roll over to turn off the lamp, and he'd be standing there in the doorway. I used to try to speak to him. I don't do that anymore. He never has answered me. He just stares. A couple of days ago, he graduated from standing in the doorway to coming in and sitting on the bed. He still doesn't speak. I have asked him what he wants. I've asked him if anything is bothering him. It's not like him to be so quiet. He usually waits until my wife is asleep. That's the part that gets me. She always falls asleep before me, and he has never come in when she's awake. But then, she didn't have a hand in this. If something doesn't change soon, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm starting to feel like he knows that I'm the one who killed him. I was walking through the woods. It was dark, and the sound of animals filled the air. That was when I saw the red line in the dirt. I stepped over it. Suddenly, I felt cold. Something was wrong here. An evil presence hung around the place. Then it hit me. The animal noises had stopped. This was too strange. I was going back home. However, I could not go back. I was drawn forward. That was when the swing set came into view. It was an extremely depressing sight. There was just one swing that sat suspended between two bars, 10 feet apart. Something about this swing terrified me. Yet, what was so bad about it? It was just a swing. What could happen with one ride? I walked over and sat down. The rusty chains squeaked. I swung out my legs like I did as a child. 30 seconds passed. I should probably get going, I thought to myself. I will stay on for just a little longer. Freak. Just a little longer. Freak. Little longer. Freak. Longer. Freak. The next day, the police found a 14-year-old child who had been missing since yesterday. Autopsy stated that the child was found in the fetal position. There was a knife clutched in his pale hand, cuts on his arms. The cuts formed words. Up and down, up and down. Just a little longer, Mommy. Just a little longer. I was on a business trip about a year ago, and I had to drive from Denver to LA. It was a long drive, and I was growing tired of the road, so I stopped at the Holiday Inn hotel that was nearby. I walked up to the desk and rang the bell. Just seconds later, a man came out from the back room. "Hello, sir. My name is John Shelby," the man said. "How can I assist you?" "I'm looking for a room," I replied. "Are there any available?" He searched in his computer to see if a room was available. To my luck, there was one room left. He gave me a key and told me to have a nice night. I asked him to point me toward a vending machine, and he did just that. When I walked to the vending machine, craving a bag of chips, I noticed a pool at the end of the hall. A lot of hotels have pools, there's nothing strange about that. What got me confused was the fact that the water was red, blood red. I purchased my bag of chips and went back to the front desk where the man was still present. "What's up with that pool back there?" I asked him. "What do you mean, sir?" he asked, a confused look grown upon his face. "The water is red," I said. "Why is it red?" He took off his glasses and took a deep breath. "Well, it's kind of a freaky story," he said. "Years ago, a woman was found brutally murdered in that pool, and the water was contaminated with her blood." "Are you telling me that her blood is still in there?" No, of course not," he said. "The water was removed and the pool was closed down, but many people say they see the pool filled with red water." He put his glasses back on. "Personally, I had never seen it, but I think this hotel likes to play tricks with your mind." "So this place is haunted then?" He shook his head yes. I was shocked, not really scared, but just surprised, because I had never had an experience like that before. I went up to my room, took a well-needed hot shower, and I laid in bed. I couldn't sleep for some reason. My mind was so curious, and it had so many questions that needed answers. I got out of bed, put on a shirt, and I walked out into the hallway. I walked down the hall and headed toward the pool. It was quiet out in the halls. I guess nobody else had trouble sleeping. I was laughing at myself when I realized I was in my underwear, so it was a good thing that nobody was out in the halls at that time. I did believe that I saw a woman cross from one room to the other. I didn't think anything of it at the time, I just figured it was another guest. When I reached the floor of the pool, I was able to see the blood-red water even from way down the hall. I passed the front desk. Nobody was there. I then passed the vending machine and I stopped directly in front of the door that would lead to the pool. I tried the door, but it was locked. I don't think I would have gone in even if it wasn't. I looked through the large window that showed the blood-contaminated pool. It looked as if the pool had been closed for a long time. I looked behind me, down the hall to the elevator. I was imagining a scene from The Shining when the stream of blood came shooting out of the elevator. I had a feeling that I would see something similar to that, but I didn't. Instead, I saw a woman standing at the edge of the pool and looking as if she was about ready to jump in. She was completely nude, Not a single piece of clothing on her body. When she snapped her head my way, I jumped back in fear and I walked back to my room as fast as I could, taking the stairs next to the vending machine instead of the elevator. Hours later, I woke up to my alarm going off. I took a shower, threw on some clothes, and I walked down to the first floor for breakfast. After breakfast, I was ready to check out and get back on the road. I decided to take one last look at the pool before I leave. I walked slowly past the front desk, past the vending machine, and to the pool. I was still freaked out by what happened the night before as I looked through the window. I was surprised to see that the pool was empty. There was no red water and there was no woman. I walked back to the front desk where a woman was working. "Is John Shelby available?" I asked. She gave me a confused look. "Excuse me?" she said. "John Shelby," I repeated. "He was working here last night." "John Shelby died back in 1982, she said. "He killed himself after murdering a woman right there in that pool." She laughed. "Is this a joke, sir?" "Yeah," I said, forcing out a laugh. "It was just a joke." I returned my key and I left the building. I got back on the road, never forgetting about what had happened that night in that hotel. Intuitive ads. You see them everywhere now and don't really give it a second thought. Ads that use tracking cookies to track your browsing history or personal profile and provide suggestions that might appeal to you. You know, the way Amazon suggests a new book based on what you just read. Or when you search for something on Google and then start seeing ads for it on other websites. Or when you're a 20-something-year-old girl in a relationship on Facebook and suddenly all of your ads are for engagement rings and wedding planners. The point is, we're all so used to this that we don't really pay attention to it anymore. But lately, these targeted ads have been unnervingly on point. Buy plastic sheeting in bulk. Electric chainsaws on sale now. Affordable dry lime. Overnight shipping available. I don't know how they're doing it. I don't know what technology is driving these changes. But somehow, it's like the internet is reading my mind, showing me ads for things that it couldn't possibly know I wanted. I swear to God, I didn't touch a keyboard, I didn't do a search. I was so careful to keep all of my plans and research and ideas offline. How is it doing this? How does it know about the bodies? It's in the dustiest books that you may find the best stories.